Hi. I did not adjust ahead of time, and I should have. So, welcome back to part 2 of all of what happened to me. So I figure this is probably going to be a multiple part series, and I'm very pleased to see that I have 12 views, which are mostly for only 5 minutes, but I actually have one subscriber who made my day when my friend told me that you'd subscribed. I had not checked the channel yet. um, anyway, so just so far as, how I think the channel's gonna go briefly, I have sent out messages to a lot of the people that I was in, both of the places that I'm going to talk about with. Which is the one that I'm talking about right now, and then also where I went after this, which is where the real horror story starts. Believe me, if you think this is bad, you haven't seen anything. So, Libby's joining me again. I have my timer up in the corner, which I think I may have just gestured in the opposite direction of, but okay. I have my timer up in the corner, and my hair's still doing the thing. So hopefully this time I won't go, like, super fucking long, but I'm thinking I might make these around an hour, just because an hour seems to be pretty good. I have no idea if this one's gonna be, a whole day again. I don't actually plan these ahead of time, I just get in front of the camera and talk, which is why I'm stalling now. So, yeah, that is the summary of how the channel is going, and, I did add in, I both put in the description of both of the videos now, once I've edited this in the future, and also in the About Me section there is an email, and if anybody who's watching this has gone to one of these places and wants to share a video or even just talk, feel free to email me there, and I'm gonna watch a video before I put it up, so you know, but I'd be more than happy to add videos to the channel from other people who have been through the same experience, or similar. I should stop stalling now, shouldn't I? So, where we left off, I had just barely fallen asleep on the floor in Burrito, which, if you don't remember, is Tarp, sleeping bag, Tarp, staff member. And I am much better now, but I was very, very claustrophobic at the time. I just handle anxiety a lot better than most people. So I finally managed to get to sleep, and I don't really dream, although I do remember when I was trying to fall asleep, I had these weird, like, jolts in my brain, and I don't even know how to describe them, and I never did find out what they were, but that is something that happened for the next couple of weeks, and I always kind of wonder if it was something to do with adjusting to where I was. So, the next morning, I am not lucky enough to be the sort of person who lays there with my eyes closed for a little bit and gets a chance to forget where I am. But even if I wasn't the sort of person that wakes up and pretty much instantly opens my eyes unless I know it's way before when I need to be up, I woke up to, "Charlie! It's time to get up!" from a staff member standing probably 3 feet away from me, screaming to the rest of the room to get up. Which was very, very... Yeah, I can't even be sarcastic about that when I was terrified. So, I jolt up, sit up, realize I don't have my glasses, which the night before I had put into my crock the shoe, and set them. I don't know if I mentioned that, but we did have the Crocs that we changed into when we were in the cabin. And I put them in that shoe, and I set them next to the bed that was next to me, away from, like, there were no ladders on the beds, but away from the area where I figured somebody would get down from it. So patted around the floor for my glasses for a bit, because I am absolutely blind without these. Like, watch, most people understand it when I do this. If that helped some of you, yay. But you could stand across the room from me and hold up 3 fingers, and I would not be able to tell you how many fingers you were holding up. So I'm patting around the floor for my glasses, and I remember that they're in the Crocs, so I find, like, the vaguely gray portion of the floor, and I go to reach for them, just in time for a foot to land on them. Which was lovely. So I freak out, and I'm like, oh my god, my glasses, and the person who landed on them was just kind of, oh, sorry, and, like, left. And I was like, oh, thanks. So I put my glasses on, and I have no time to figure out who it is, but when I put the glasses on, this portion is bent in such a way that they sat on my face like this. Which, for any of the glasses wearers out there, this is migraine-inducing to the max. And it also skews your vision to the side, but individually between the eyes in a way that it's hard to describe. It makes it impossible to see through them. So I'm sitting there trying to figure out what in the hell to do to my glasses, so I bend the frame back up as best I can, but they're still sitting like this on my face, which is enough. And so I turn to the staff who's in the sleeping bag next to me, and I'm like, so what do I do about this? I need new glasses. I can't, like, this hurts my head already, and I've only been wearing them for 30 seconds. What do I do? And the staff was like, well, you're going to have to talk to your therapist, who is coming at some point in the future, and I don't know when. So, that was a lovely conversation, during which I tried to convince them to let me call my parents, which they would not do. And I tried to convince them to ask someone else to get into contact with my parents to let them know that my glasses had broken and I needed a new pair, which they would not do. So, I fixed them again as best I could to try to get them as straight as I could, and I couldn't make it much better. And had to carry on with my day that way, which was very nausea-inducing and very migraine-inducing. So, we get up, and one of the staff is talking to Harley, who was in a bunk across the room from me. And so I'm watching the staff talk to Harley, and then Harley goes, oh wait, that's me? And gets down from their bunk and calls Charlie. And so we all go Charlie, and at this point I'm not talking to anybody, so I just shut up. And I'm sitting on the ground, and Harley goes, okay, it is time for morning time frame. This includes, pack up your sleeping bag, switch out your shoes, grab your day bag, put your Crocs in your day bag, fill up your water bottles. Oh wait, no. We already filled them up last night. Ignore that one. End of time frame, be lined up outside, holding bear bags, ready to go. So, everybody, and then, Hazi-Khan, I believe, was reading, and Negi-Khan, I know, was slunch, which I will explain when we get there. So, I have no idea what slunch means. I know that I have 20 minutes to put my sleeping bag back in the thing, grab my water bottles, figure out what a day bag is, put my Crocs into whatever the day bag is, and be outside with my non-existent bear bag. So, on the bright side, I have 1 less thing to do, and 2 more things to do. So, hello, Zoe. Thank you, Zoe. Um, that was my dad's dog. Um, so I get up and I gather up my sleeping bag and my red and go outside, and it is onto the deck with the staff, and it is cold as hell. Which, if you've never been in North Carolina in the morning, even in the summer, it is very cold. So I put my red on instead of putting it back into the sleeping bag, which did some. And I just shoved my sleeping bag into my backpack and then turned to the staff and was like, "So what is a day bag?" And the staff informed me that a day bag is literally just the sleeping bag that nobody ever actually puts their sleeping bag back into. They all just shove it in their pack, and they use the bag that the sleeping bag comes in to carry stuff around base. So I'm like, okay, what do you think I should put in my day bag? And the staff is like, well, you have your journal and your pencils in there. I would put those in there, and just toothbrush, just whatever you think you might need. So I dig through and I find my little bag that has all of my hygiene stuff and my journal and stuff, and also the sleeping bag, and I take out my journal and I put a couple of pencils in there. And I realize I have to put my Crocs in there, so I take the journal out and I put my Crocs on the bottom so I don't dirty the journal because I'm like that with books. And I put my toothbrush in there, and I'm pretty sure that was the extent of it. Oh, she also suggested that I put something called my phase book in there, which I did not know what that meant yet, but it looked important. And obviously, we've heard the word phase before to describe students, so I figure the phase book is probably important. So I put the phase book in there, and I pull the top closed and sling it over my shoulder, and we head back in, and I grab my water bottles from where I left them next to my bed, bed, and the staff informs me that the tarp used in burrito is my responsibility. Yay! So I gather up the tarp, and I frantically fold it on my own so that I'm within the time frame, because I don't know at this point that I'm allowed to ask for help, and the staff didn't offer. So, fold up my tarp, and I'm like, where do I put it? And the staff is like, probably just with your pack, and I'm like, okay, so we go back outside, and I set it down, and I gather up my water bottles and my day bag, and my non-existent bear bag, and we head out, and I'm yet again last in line, which is where I want to be. So, we all count off. Time frame is called, and we get 5 minutes reading time, which I don't think actually happened the night before. But if it did, I just don't remember it. At the time, we were reading through all the Harry Potter books, so basically what would happen is a staff would carry the book and would have a bookmark in wherever the group was, and then for however many minutes we had, the staff would read the book out loud while we were falling asleep. So, like, after lights out, but we could stay awake to listen to the book. Which I think they were in the 5th book when I got there. And so we all hike back over to Middle Earth, which, if you remember, is the place with the gazebo and the fire pit under it. And we're all just kind of sitting around, and I happen to pull out my journal to do something, and I'm looking at the phase book, and I turn to the staff, and I'm like, what is this? And the staff tells me that this is how you work through this program. You complete all of the things in that phase book, which their tasks varying from one of them in phase 1 that I remember is specifically like you read up on 3 different ways to purify water, which is boiling it, putting a very small amount of bleach or iodine in it and just shaking it up, and the third is filtering it. So we run through that whole thing, and then she's like, you basically just have to and You just have to come to me and demonstrate an understanding of it, unless it specifically tells you to write something. And once you've demonstrated that you understand the assignment and what you just read through, then I will sign that off for you. And once I sign that off for you, it's completed and you can work on however many you want at once. You can get 18 of them, or you can get the whole level book done and sit down with me for a half an hour and just go through all of them one by one and we can sign them all off, or you can do them one at a time, or however you want. You just cannot do them during meals and, like, after lights out. And obviously during hikes and stuff, but you don't want to fall on your face because you're trying to read your level book. And I would. So, I'm like, okay, this seems easy enough. So I read through the whole thing about how to boil the water and bleach the water and iodine the water and filter the water. And, which it's all what it sounds like. The only difference with the filter is you have a bag and the filter's at the bottom and you use gravity to push the water through the filter into a tube that goes into a bucket or whatever you use to collect the water. And that water is now clean enough to drink. Not that I fully believe that, but, so I read through the thing, and I turn to the staff, and I'm like, okay, so what do I have to do to demonstrate an understanding? And she's like, well, in this case, I just want you to run through how the 3 methods work, which is what I've just described to you. And after that, tell me which method you think that we as a group use when we're out on Expo. To which I'm like, what is Expo? And she's like, Expo is 2 weeks of hiking and camping. And I'm like, so we're not going to be here the whole time. And she's like, yeah, no, sometimes we're going to be out in the woods, sometimes we're going to be at a place called Sky Valley, which, do you know what a yurt is? Which, at the time I didn't know what a yurt is, but a yurt is basically, the way that I've described it, is a tent with a floor. So instead of just a tent sitting on the ground, it is, like, walls that are made of tarps, but the floor is like a raised wooden deck, so you're not just on the ground. And then the rest of the time we're at base, which is where we currently were. So it's like a 4-week rotation. Except they don't tell us when we're going to leave, because we are not allowed to have future information. Ever. About anything. So, we move on from that topic, and I go, well, I think if I had to guess, I would assume you would boil the water, just because I know that that's a way to produce a lot of clean water fairly quickly. And she was like, actually, that's not a bad guess. Most people go with bleach, but we actually have filters, which are just, like I explained, a bag that you put water in, and you hang it from a tree or somewhere else high, and you let gravity work it through. Which was an interesting moment for me, and I never got super sick drinking that water, but I still don't know if I believe that, like, bacteria and parasites were entirely washed out of there. So if I find out in a month that I have, like, a 40-foot-long tapeworm, I'll let you know. So, I'm like, cool, so does that mean I finished it? And she's like, yeah, you finished it, and I hand it over to her, and she signs it off, and I've already got one done. So I get the idea to flip through to see how many there are, and what I ended up doing in all of my level books from then on was keeping a tally at the front. I would write down the number of how many tasks there were, like individual things I needed to get signed off, and then every time I completed one, I would put a tally mark. So, I flip through the rest of them, and we finish off a couple of the easy ones, which these things range from, like, learning how to build a fire and how to start one without matches, all the way to history assignments where you read a little bit about the area and then you write something that shows that you understand the assignment, yet again. Or, sometimes it was stuff to go over with your therapist. Like, one of them was I had to, draw a whole family tree of everybody that I knew about in the family, and just discuss it with her and my relationships with all of those people. So it varies greatly what sort of tasks you encounter. So I did the history one, I did the one that I was already doing, that I already spoke of with the water. Um, I did like one more, so I wound up with 3 tallies, and I'm feeling pretty good about myself, and I'm flipping back through the rest of the book, and I'm like, so the closest one I can think of that I can do like right now is figure out how to set up a tent, but when do I do that? And she was like, oh, we have a couple of other students who need practice with setting up tents who haven't been on Expo yet. So we could grab a tent and have you guys practice setting it up, and then I'll sign off your level work. And I'm like, oh, that's sweet, okay. Which, right around that time, breakfast gets called, and so we all go, or we all do the thing again with the, or no, I didn't talk about that last night. So breakfast is called, and I assume that I just need to sit where I am, which during this time they've been cooking something in the pot again, so we go to, everybody goes and puts their cups in the area next to the pot, and some of them have their spoons in, and some of them have their spoons out, and some of them are just holding their spoons, and I'm like, how does this whole spoon scenario work? And the staff is like, so if you put the spoon in, say the cups are this big, and they were cups, not bowls. They had like a little handle and everything. So say the cup's like this big. If you put your spoon in, that means you want about this much, which is the minimum you have to eat for safety. And if you leave your spoon out, you want the full cup. Which, depending on how much we made, we would heap that thing. Eventually, we got very hungry. But so I asked what was for breakfast, and she was like, well, it's Tuesday, so oats. And I was like, alright, cool. I don't think I like oats. Because at this point, I'm already aware that I am autistic and have texture issues with food, and just kind of peeking at what was in the pot, it did not look edible remotely to me. Like, it was just this white mush. So I put my spoon in. And, so one of the staff stays behind to, like, serve the food, and the rest of us end up in a circle directly next to the gazebo. And I'm kind of waiting for something to happen, and all of a sudden they all start chanting. And I don't remember the first portion of it, but the second portion of it was, "Oh, Hannah Charles, today I will do my very most excellent best." And for whatever reason, everybody yelled the last line. And I was like, so crazy town is happening again. And after that, Harley goes, okay, so today we are going to bust a fab, which is, and they look at me, I am feeling about because. So, for instance, I am feeling excited about oats because I really like oats. Pass right. And so it goes around the circle and they get to me, and I lean to my staff and go, do I have to participate? And the staff says, no, just for today you don't have to participate if you want to just watch. So I go, yeah, I'd rather watch, pass. So everybody goes around and busts a fab. And once it gets back to Harley, Harley goes, okay, circle moss in 3, 2, 1, and then everybody turns around. What? So I turn to the staff, and the staff explains to me circle moss is moment of silence. And basically what you do is you turn around, and you face outward, and you don't talk. A lot of the religious students use it to pray, but you can use the time for whatever you want to do as long as it's quiet. When you're done, you just turn back around and you hold your finger out into the center of the circle, which lets everybody know that you're finished. So just point your finger. So, okay, I turn around, and I'm not super religious, and I mean, at this point, I'm basically not religious, but that is a complicated conversation. So I turn back around and put my finger in the middle, and I'm pleased to see that I am not the first person to have turned back around. And slowly everybody else turns around and puts their fingers in the middle, and Harley, once everybody has put their fingers in, surveys the group to make sure that everybody is turned back around, and starts chanting again, which it takes everybody a second to join in, but the chant went, Happy llama, sad llama, totally rad llama, super llama, drama llama, big fat mama llama, don't forget Baraka llama, moose, alpaca, moose, moose, alpaca, gopher, moose, alpaca, moose, moose, alpaca, unicorn, awkward turtle and her babies, evil Dr. Coconut sitting in the palm tree, he falls on the awkward turtle and her babies, they die, oh no, what do? Let's eat them. Which, I did that like that because that's how it was done. And I have no idea what just happened, and I can't decide whether to laugh or cry, because that was probably one of the strangest things I've ever witnessed, and the only thing I can at all compare it to was a YouTube video that I watched a long time ago, but it was not like that. And so, that happened, and everybody turns around, goes back, sits down, and grabs their cups on their way. And I wait for everybody else to grab their cup because I don't know what mine looks like. And everybody else grabs their cup, so I grab the last cup with the spoon in. And there is brown sugar on top of the oats, which I think makes it look a little bit better. And I notice that there's brown sugar on the bottom too, so I'm like, okay. Which, I mean, this is a teeny tiny amount of brown sugar, but I like sugar. And I like sweet things. So I stir it in, and I take a bite, and it is disgusting. Like, it tastes like... The only way I can describe it is like... If you've stood in a room full of hay before, it tastes like that smells. So I pretty much just set the cup down and ignore it for the rest of the meal. During which time the staff's like, you're not gonna make safety, and I'm like, I kind of don't care at this point, but what do I have to do to make safety? And the staff is like, you have to eat at least the minimum serving of food at every meal. You have to drink all 3 of your water bottles. You have to change your underwear. And you have to do 3 tick checks. Which I asked her to explain, and it's like, you just say out loud what you're doing, and you check locations that ticks would normally be. So you go, I'm checking my hair, I am checking my armpits, I am checking under my boobs, and just stuff like that. And, you just describe it as you're going, and once you're done and you've found no ticks, or even if you do find a tick, because the whole point is to check for them, you get it signed off in your book. And I'm like, well, what book? I didn't see it in my Facebook. And she's like, check the back of your journal. So I flipped to the back of my journal, and it's a completely blank page. And she's like, oh, okay, you must have never turned in your journal last night. And I was like, turn in my journal? And she was like, yeah, every night you have to put your journal in the pile so that we can put notes in it. And I'm like, does that mean you can read through my journal? And she's like, I mean, yeah, we can. And I'm like, so I get no privacy here at all whatsoever. Not in the bathroom, not in my journal. The only place that's still private is my head. And I'm starting to feel like they're going to figure out a way to read my thoughts. And so I have a tiny existential crisis about that. And she takes my journal and writes on the back page just stuff to do, essentially. So it was like, which it's just daily tasks for if you run out of level work. So for me, it was, I think, bust 3 fabs. And, like, complete level work. Usually you get 3 tasks, but when I was so new, I think I only got 1 or 2 for a couple of days, just because I don't know what's going on. So I'm like, how would I go, like, do busting fabs at meal times like we just did count? And she was like, no, you have to call Charlie and get everyone's attention, then bust a fab. And I'm like, not doing that. She's like, well, you don't have to complete your daily tasks, but you would have to do that and meet safety 3 days in a row in order to phase up. Which is... yay? So I figure I'm just gonna wait until I know the group better and then actually start worrying about that. But on the other hand, I do want to do the level work, so that one I will at least get checked out or checked off. So, um, at this point, I realize that I am like nowhere near down on my water, so I spend the rest of the meal kind of yet again slowly chugging my water so as to try not to hurt myself, but also to get it done because I don't want to be the bane of the group's existence yet again. Um, and then eventually everybody's pretty much done eating, and Harley gets up and says, "Okay, we are going to do after breakfast time frame. This includes get sunscreen, get bug spray, brush your teeth, put sump into the sump bag. Whoever's in charge of cleaning the pot, clean the pot. Brush your teeth and kill your waters. We have a half an hour to do this. PosiCon, 5 minutes reading time. NegiCon, slunch." So, sorry, my parents got home. I had to pause it. So we left off at after breakfast time frame. So half an hour, PosiCon, plus 5 minutes reading time, NegiCon, lunch. Which I still have like 500 milliliters left on my water bottle, and I don't know how in the fuck I'm gonna drink that in a half an hour and do everything else. But I figure I'm gonna try. So, first thing I do is I track down the staff that has the toothpaste again, while being very cautious to keep my staff with me, because at this point I've resolved to get out of there as quickly as I humanly can. So we make our way over to the person with the toothpaste, and before I can actually get toothpaste, one of the other students shows up, and she's got her hair tied, she's got long blonde hair, and she's got her hair tied back in a bandana, and she just looks like adorably hippie, and she comes up and goes, "Hi, you seem really nice. Can I boop your nose?" And and she just seems so excited, and I normally don't like being touched, but she was adorable and very excited, and so I said yes, and she just boops me right on the nose, and kind of like wiggles happily, and then like runs away, yelling like another group member's name, "I made a friend!" And I was like, I mean, that was the easiest friend I've ever made, okay. And so that happened, and I proceed to go get toothpaste from the staff. And I brushed my teeth, and, for bug spray, it was just put your arms out, get sprayed, turn around, get sprayed. And, for the sunscreen, I was like, "Where do I put it? Do you care?" And they were like, "No," so I just kind of put, like, a little bit on my nose and some on the back of my neck and called it good. So, after that, we get toward the end of time frame, and we're at like a couple of seconds left, and I am nowhere near done with my water again. So, finally the time frame's over, and we get NegiCon, which is lunch. Which I don't know what that is. And so I'm trying to ask a staff what in the hell lunch is, but the staff are like, "No, like we're going somewhere," and then we get into the line, and they're like, "We'll explain when we get down to where we're going." So we get in and we call our numbers and everything. We drop by the cabin that we slept in to drop off our bear bags. And then we start hiking down toward the main area where I was yesterday, like where I got dropped off, which was another tsunami of emotion that I had to sort of bury, because thinking about it now, it was no. And I thought several times about just kind of bolting away from the group to go rescue Libby from the box. But of course, at this point, I'm in the mindset of I'm going to get out of here fast. So, we go down to this. We end up in this little area. next to a creek, and it's like there was grass and then just this little creek flowing through, which we were not allowed to go into. But it was nice to sit next to, and the staff were like, alright, spread out, it is silent time. And I'm like, okay, cool, more level work time, I guess. So I read through some of the more complicated level work that I hadn't wanted to do earlier and start to kind of piece together how to do that. And as I'm doing that, a staff is coming around and handing people pieces of paper and like taking their phase book and handing them a pen. And the staff finally gets to me, and I'm like, so what's this? And the staff explains it is on Tuesdays, which I showed up on a Monday, we write letters to our parents. And on Tuesdays and only Tuesdays can they be collected and sent. And in order to get a pen so that I can't sign off my phase work on my own, I have to hand in my phase book in exchange for the pen, which is not ideal, but I do want to write a letter. So I take the paper and take my pen, and it takes me a minute to kind of come up with what I'm gonna write, but I decide that I am going to try my best to get out of here through this letter, because this is my first chance to convince my parents that I don't need to be here. So I might actually have the letter. I'm gonna pause for a second and see if I... So I did find the letter. Sorry, I was reading and hit play before I was ready to hit play. So I did find the letter. Some stuff has happened in the letter that has not happened yet, which I remember now. I kept the letter and worked on it over the course of more than one day. So at this point I get the letter, and I start out with my sort of guilt-trippy idea, and kind of run out of stuff to say, so I figure I'll save it for later. So I fold it up and I put it in my pocket, and I try to wave a staff down to give me, or to take the pen back so that I can work on my phase work, and I do eventually get a staff to take the pen back and work on my phase work. And by the time we're almost done with stuff, I've called the staff over and I've completed several different things of phase work, so I get some more stuff signed off. And the only real things I have left, I believe, are finding poison ivy. It might just be finding poison ivy. So basically I just have to find poison ivy and point at it, and I'm done with my phase 1 work. Which is fantastic news to me, because I figure if I have finished most of phase 1 in one day, I can probably finish the rest of the phases in this much time. And if it only, depending on how many phases there are, there can't be more than like 20, so I'd probably only be here for 20 days. So I turn to the staff and I go, hey, how many phases are there? And I find out there are 6 total phases, but not everyone has to complete phase 6. It's just sort of what you do in the meantime until you leave. Once you've completed phase 5, most people's parents let them leave. Which is where I get even further the idea that my parents are distinctly involved in this. Like, they do have a say over when I leave here. So, we end up getting called into a circle for lunch, which a staff goes around with hand sanitizer and gives us all a squirt, and we do the hand sanitizer thing. And, so, once we've finished with that, we, we sit in a circle for lunch, and the staff go around and hand us all 2 tortillas, which are whole wheat and about this big, and a packet of tuna, 2 things of mustard, and 1 thing of mayo. Which I'm looking at this going, what do I do with that? And the staff's like, you eat it. That was a lovely conversation. So I've never had tuna before in my life, so I kind of open the pack and give it a little sniff, and it smells gross, but I take a little bit out just to see what it's like, and I eat it, and it's disgusting to me. And I'm like, that's just no. So, I turn to the tortilla, and at this point in time, I'm a very picky eater because of the texture issues and not knowing what I can trust, so I figure I probably don't like mayo, and I probably don't like mustard. So I eat tortillas for lunch, which was fun. This time I'd actually been drinking some of my water, but I will tell you by the time we got to the time frame, I actually did manage to drink it all. The only catch to what is going on is I start to converse with people, or attempt to, and I keep getting shushed. Which finally I turn to the staff and I'm like, can you please explain to me why I'm not allowed to talk right now? Because clearly I'm not allowed to talk and nobody else is. And the staff explains to me that we got slunch as a negicon, which means we cannot talk during lunch. There is also Sleckfist and Slinner. And then pretty much anything can be made silent. So, we sit there and do not talk, and I'm not allowed to do any phase work during a meal, and I'm not allowed to write my journal during a meal, so basically I finish my tortillas very quickly and stare off into the distance and, like, pick at the grass until we're done. And then, the staff, get us up, and we do after lunch time frame, which is basically just pack up everything from lunch and kill your waters, which I do actually succeed in doing, barely. So we get plus 5 minutes reading time, and from there, we hike out of the other exit. So the entrance that we went into for the field was basically a straight shot slightly to the left from where our cabin was. And the exit that we took was all the way to the other end of the field, and we kind of doubled back and came back a little bit, but we went around the big pond that's in front, and we wind up at this little cabin. And wonderful time for you to vacuum, Dad. And we wind up at the little cabin, and I'm informed that we are going into Teacher Dave's, so I have to leave my day bag out here, and I have to switch my shoes for my Crocs, but if I want to bring my journal, I can bring that in with me. So I grab my journal out, and I switch into my Crocs, and I leave my shoes under where my day bag is hanging on a hook, and one of the staff goes in ahead of us, and the rest of everybody starts kind of chattering excitedly to each other, and I don't know what's going on, but I'm hearing phase over and over again. And we go in, and we all sit down at these desks around the room, and there's no assigned seating, so I just pick a desk near the door, and the staff takes the seat next to me. My staff, yay. And so we're kind of hanging out, and one of the students comes around with all of these, like, manila folders, or filing folders, rather, and starts handing them out to people. And people start opening their folders, and a lot of excited yelling is happening, and I'm like, what? And I'm looking around, and there's little phase books in in some of the folders. So, I guess the way that they told everybody that they were phasing up this round was to put them in the folder and have them open it, and it's a surprise. Which is where I kind of figure out that most phase up ceremonies are done as some sort of surprise. So you don't even know when you're going to phase up once you've completed all of the level work. And I saw none of these people working on phase work throughout the previous day. So I figured I may not be progressing as quickly as I think I am. But anyway, so finally, Teacher Dave is his name, comes in and congratulates the people who got their phase books, and we start sort of well, everybody else just starts working on stuff. And I don't know what's going on, so I lean over to my staff and I'm like, what is happening? And she's like, well, one of the things that you do when you're on base is you complete the work, and I think you get an English credit for it, which I'm like, sweet, I'll do that. And so, which that is the story of how I graduated high school with an extra English credit. Yay. And so, I try to flag down the teacher by raising my hand, and he's like, you don't have to raise your hand, you can just yell at me, and I'm like, oh, okay. Teacher Dave? Help. And so he comes over and he's like, I haven't seen you yet. Like, are you new? And I'm like, yeah, no, this is my second day. And he's like, oh, yeah, okay, that would be why I haven't seen you. So I'm gonna go grab you a folder and your work. And I'm like, okay, cool. And so he brings me over the folder and he brings me over, bits of work. And, I ask, and he says, just write your name on the label there. And I ask if it has to be my legal name or if I can use my preferred name. And he says, it doesn't really matter, so I just write my preferred name, Dan. And, so I start looking at the work, and it's not real hard. It's, you read something and then you write something, yet again. Except this time it is English-oriented, and you're meant to write something longer than just a little explanation. So, I get to work, and I finish the first assignment pretty quickly. And, I have it written down in my notebook, so I go up to, so I call for Teacher Dave again, and I ask him if he'll look over my work, and if I can move on to the next thing. And so he looks it over and basically rips it apart, and I consider myself to be a fairly good writer. I've always been the teacher's pet in English, I'm good at this. And he's tearing this thing apart, like, circling every grammar error, like, every little thing, and he's like, yeah, it's not good enough. So at that point, I'm pissed off, and I'm like, great, what else can I do? So I resolved to not do any of the work, because at this point I'm stubborn like that. And to be fair, he was not nice in correcting it, he was very mean about it, or at least rude about it, from my perspective. Whether or not he meant to be, that was how it came across. And so I resolved to not do anything. And so I just kind of doodled in my notebook for the rest of the time that we were doing that. And then we get dismissed, and everybody hands back in their folders, and we exit, and we head back into processing what I remember. We head back up to Middle Earth, and while we're at Middle Earth, I talked to the staff and I'm like, hey, can we do the tent setup thing? You said that we could do it later today, right? And she was like, oh yeah, totally, oh my god. So, she sends one of the other staff to go run and get a tent, and they come back with the tent, and they plop it on the ground in front of us, and go, okay, the way that we're gonna do this is, you get to set up the tent, and whenever you figure it out, y'all get it signed off. Well, I get it signed off, and everybody else is good. And I'm like, okay, this can't be too bad, like, I used to follow my brother around a lot in Boy Scouts, I've set up a tent before. So, I get to work on it, except everybody else cannot figure out for the life of them what in the hell is going on. So it was a tent with the poles go down to the side, and then there's a long pole across the middle, and then another triangle of poles. So I figure we gotta set up the frame first. So, I find these little pipes that have, it looks like where you would put them in. So, I put together mine, and then one of the other students turns around and goes, that's genius, and does the same. And then we're looking at the longest pole, and we have our two frames, and we're trying to figure out how we're supposed to put that pole into these frames, because it is at a very strange angle. So we try to sort of put it in, and it's not working, and we turn it around, and we try it the other way, and it's not working, and we turn it back around, and we try it the other way, and it's not working. And we turn to the staff, and we're like, we really can't get this, can we just have one hint? And she's like, you're doing it right now. And she ended up coming over, and it was just really not wanting to go in. Um, so anyway, she helps us force it into the frame, and we get the actual tent out, and I can't figure out how to attach the tent to the frame, except there's this little loop, so I figure I'm just gonna hook it around, like, the white part, and hope it doesn't fall off. So we did that on both ends, and then there were these little things at the bottom attached to the corners of the tent, little metal sticks, and one of the other people figured out that you stick them into the bottom of the poles. So now we've got a tent that's just kind of sitting there and pretty much set up. And there's another portion which turned out to be a rain tarp that we couldn't figure out how to put on, but the staff called it good enough and explained to us that we'd done it essentially right, but what we want to do is we want to hook the portion that's holding the tent up over the portion where the top pole goes in before we put the top pole in, so that way the tent doesn't, like, fall off in the middle of the night. And also we would want to stake down the tent, which I was like, yeah, I thought so. I could see where we put the stakes, but, like, I don't have any stakes. And she's like, yeah, you just go find a stick and a rock and you hammer them in. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we all go get a stick and a rock and we pull the thing out and we hammer them in. And I was the only one who got it at the right angle, because you're supposed to angle it away from the tent so that it doesn't just pull in over time. So that went well. And then we had one portion of the tent that had a specific knot that it needed to be tied, and I remembered that I have all of these knots that I need to learn for phase 1 was one of my other things that was left. Which, I'm sorry if it's not super chronologically ordered, I'm remembering as I'm talking. So we end up sitting there for a long time and just going through all of these knots, and I'm having way too much fun with these knots. And I get, like, every single one of them signed off, like, second try, because all I have to do is watch her do it once, do it myself with help, undo the knot, and then just do it again. Which, a lot of these knots I still use, and they were very helpful. So, I learned all of my knots, and I learned how to set up a tent, which was kind of fun. So after we hang out and do a little bit of level work for a little longer, we end up getting all lined up again. Obviously we had to pack back up the tent, so we stop off and we set the tent back. And then we go back down into the main area, and this time we turn right toward the horse field. Which I'm like, oh my god, we get to go hang out with horses now, right? And we get there, and we head over to, like, the stables area, and I can see the horses, and I'm excited, and I want to go in and, like, pet them, and hopefully maybe ride them, and just, you know, hang out with horses. And, so I'm kind of eagerly approaching that, and the rest of the students all go off to the side and grab, the little, like, hay shovels, or, I guess, rakes. You don't rake with them, you shovel with them, but they're somewhere between a shovel and a rake. And I'm like, what are those for? And they're like, we gotta go pick up all of the poop before we can play with the horses. And I'm like, why? And this field is massive. And we spent probably a half an hour out in the sun, baking, not allowed to roll our sleeves up or roll our pants up, for no reason. And we're just shoveling poop. And then we got to hang out with the horses, and all we got to do was stand in a field with one of them and brush them for maybe, like, 20 minutes. And then after that, we went back and had dinner. Which, time frame happens again. I did not succeed in killing my water, which landed us Slygene. And so we got Slygene. Dinner was, let me think, Tuesday. Yeah. Dinner was rice and lentils, which I actually like rice. and I tried it, and it wasn't super hearty, so I could actually eat a good portion of it. And so I basically just salted the crap out of it and ate a whole bunch of rice and lentils and was very pleased with that dinner and actually feeling full for once. Um, and then we went back to the cabin and we did Slygene and we went to bed. So that's basically day 2. One detail that I did forget, while I was at Teacher Dave's trying to figure out what not to do, I was informed that since I'm on phase 1, I can choose from this specific bookshelf of books. So I picked out The Giver. And so anytime that I had a chance, I started reading, which was helping a lot with keeping my mind off of stuff, just because during the next, 2-3 days, I just get these random, we'll talk about something. Something that's normally not painful, like memes. And that will bring on, this tsunami of emotion all over again. Or we'll talk about, what we liked to do for fun before, and at the word before this, I would lose it all over again. And it was just over and over of, okay, I'm okay. I'm not okay. I'm okay. I'm not okay. I'm okay. Not okay. And it just, that's the worst part of it, is it just beats you down and beats you down and beats you down. Just the wave of emotion after emotion that you're just not prepared for any of it. And probably one of the worst parts is at this point I've made no friends. The only thing I have to comfort myself with is a book. Which I like books a lot, and I was happy to have one, but I would much rather have someone to talk to. And at this point, pretty much nobody wants to be my friend, except maybe Harley, who kind of drifted in and out, but everybody had their own cliques already, and I didn't know how to break into one of them in such a way to become friends. And, so I did have to sleep in Burrito again. I got to clean my privates with a wet wipe again. Got asked all of the same questions. I will add that meal was the first good meal that I ate. I guess I'm running out of stuff for day 2. From here on, since it gets less and less important what the individual details are, I'm going to start, just saying, the most important things that happened, and then I also found, I have all of the letters that I wrote to Rose and Jay during this period. So I think whenever I get to a point where I'd read one, I will read one, the corresponding letter. So, basically I'm just gonna start doing highlights, because from here it's pretty easy to just sum up what was going on, and still get a lot of emotion in it. And I do apologize for, not getting it quite in the right order all the time. The way that it happened, my brain has sort of blocked bits of it, and as I talk more, I'm remembering more of it, but I don't always remember it in the order that I'm supposed to know it happened, which does not make it easier. But, so if I forget something and I read a letter and I mention something that I did not talk about, if it's important, I'll probably briefly explain what I'm talking about in the letter. Other than that, I guess I don't want to make you guys sit here too long. If anybody has actually watched this far, thank you. It would really mean so much to me. And, I'll remind you all again, just in case, if you want to share a video, it does not by any means have to be as long as mine are, but if you want to share a video of just what happened to you, please absolutely send one to me, and I'll watch through it and put it up on the channel, if that's what you'd like to do with it. Otherwise, if you want to just talk, I'm always here. I've been through the same shit. Maybe not quite the same, but it was bad too. So, thank you again for listening. Bye.